Hello, everybody. Hi there, I'm Tom. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Lisa. Always nice to be in London. So, where were you 50 years ago? I know many of you weren't born then, but for those of you that were, you might remember a time when people with disabilities were routinely institutionalized and kept outside of day-to-day life. So how have we arrived at this point now, where people like Nnena Kalu and others have become a part of society, but have also become cultural leaders? So what's changed? Let's look back. So the early 1970s marked a time of enormous social change in many countries around the world. Hippie culture, feminist and civil rights movements, and an interest in deinstitutionalizing people with disabilities were all forming and advancing. Around the same time, in places around the world, in America, in Australia, and elsewhere, we see an almost spontaneous creation of the first art studios and art spaces for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. These programs are often founded as radical or collective spaces by artists who valued creativity and expression as a basic human right. This is an early photograph from Creative Growth, where newly deinstitutionalized people came together in an artist-led program to create art, to exhibit and sell their work, and to interact with the public who might get to meet them in a gallery setting. Because people didn't do that then. They still don't do it now. It's still very rare. We work with people with disabilities. Most people don't have that interaction. So this photograph to me seems a little old-fashioned, seems institutional, but this is a radical moment when people with disabilities are moving into a creative endeavor. So how have we arrived at this point of advancement? A quick review of significant steps in the advancement of the studio art system. As supported studios evolved and grew, many became more complex, hired staff, received government and foundation support, and moved from small radical spaces into proper nonprofit arts organizations. As art from these programs emerged, there really was very little context in which to understand it. The first comparisons were made to outsider art or art brut, but none of those really captured what was going on. So the work actually from the studios was first appreciated by collectors, often those who collected folk art or outsider art, who admired the unique visual appeal of the work. This interest led galleries to start to show the work because there was money involved. Okay, and then a market was created. So it was actually an artist and then collector-driven field. So slowly over time, with the support of a few visionary collectors, curators, designers, and fashion people, notably fashion people, because they look for what's new, the work slowly began to emerge on its own merits. Seen as a compelling form of human expression, often in a language related to, but distinct from the work of academically trained artists. Contemporary galleries that showed emerging artists slowly became interested in it, and works began to be included in important contemporary exhibitions, such as the Venice Biennale, here at Studio Voltaire, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and now most notably, the Turner Prize. Who won the Turner Prize, Charlotte? I don't remember. Oh, okay. Now, as the work is increasingly included in contemporary art venues and in the art market, questions arise around positioning, the role of disability, the artist's biography, its inclusion in multiple platforms at the same time. And as radical art spaces, the studios that were founded as radical art spaces intersect with capitalist and traditional structures, art studios must strive to evolve and grow as professional arts organizations, and that often creates tensions. And I know we'll talk about those things later. So I'm going to shift to talk about a specific project. I think I have some slides here. So how did we get to this point? This is an exhibition view of San Francisco Museum of Modern Art about 18 months ago. The work of Judith Scott in the front, the sculpture, and Dan Miller on the wall. So 3 years ago, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, which is considered the second most important MoMA in the US after New York, hired a new director named Christopher Bedford. And when he was hired, he received a message from the New York curator, Matthew Higgs, both of whom are Brits, actually, who told him that any director of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art should pay a visit to creative growth and understand the history and importance of art and disability and its foundings in the San Francisco Bay Area. So Chris and I got in touch, set up an initial meeting and studio visit, and he came with a team of top museum folks, curatorial, DEI, other leaders, and importantly, I mentioned this to Lindsay, he brought trustees, he brought the money. Okay, so he was thinking about what would happen. So they had a tour and it was a horrible day. All the artists, someone was having a seizure, the ambulances were there and everything's going on. He said, well, you have a lot on your plate. So we're getting ready to leave and he stops me and he says, if we were going to have an important relationship, what would it look like? And I didn't expect that. I thought he was coming to say, we visited, thank you very much. And I said, well, I think you should collect a huge amount of work for the permanent collection of MoMA. I think you should have an exhibition of that work. And I think we should have an ongoing relationship to additional one artist shows because those are very rare, and to have a continued partnership so that the works from creative growth in the collection would be partnered with other artists in the SF MoMA collection. And his response was, let's get started. So 2 primary curators were selected. Oh, I'm going to go back for a moment. So I'm going to pause for a moment to show you some of the evolution about how we get to the point of contemporary. This is an early 2001 exhibition of Judith Scott in Tokyo at the Shiseido Gallery. So this is a fashion curator who presents Judith Scott work first. Judith Scott, if you don't know her work, there's some parallels to Nnena Kalu. She was a Down syndrome artist who was institutionalized most of her life, who had a very long 20-year practice, did not use words to speak, bundled work together, hidden objects, very sort of enigmatic. This is Judith Scott's one-woman show at the Brooklyn Museum in New York. And if you want a phenomenal essay on art and disability and movements of the 70s and feminism, read Catherine Morris's introduction to this catalog from the Brooklyn Museum, which is amazing. And this is Judith Scott's work at the Venice Biennale in 2017 under the direction of Christine Marcel, who was the curator that year. She was from the Centre Pompidou and presented Judith Scott's work and Dan Miller's work, not knowing that they were artists with disabilities when she selected the work. And this is a creative growth artist named William Scott here at Studio Voltaire in London. So these are just some examples of how the work sort of evolved first from studios into a more contemporary setting. So these are the curators. On the left is Matthew Higgs, who some of you know, but then in the blue jacket is Jenny Geith, and in the black jacket is Nancy Lim, and they were the 2 curators from SF MoMA assigned to the project. So when they came to creative growth, we had to decide within the budget of SF MoMA what art were they going to pick for the museum. So we decided to select a suite of work by 7 different artists to reflect the seriousness of their professional artistic practice and to dispel these ideas that artists with disabilities don't evolve over time and they don't have serious practices. So we got to work selecting that. Also as part of that, so the work was selected and we started to plan the exhibition, and all of that was within 6 months of the first visit to Creative Growth by Chris Bedford. Also as part of that, a William Scott mural was commissioned as a site-specific work in the museum to open the exhibition. There's the mural. So and that's the opening at SF MoMA, the opening panel. So working with SF MoMA, what did we ask for? What did we learn? What did we not get? What was that relationship like? To their credit, and I hope you all have this kind of opportunity to work with partners, they entered the partnership as a challenge to themselves to learn about access and disability culture. And this was really critical to our advancement and to the learning. So a first example of how we'd work together came with the Mural Commission. These murals, that's William Scott's depiction of San Francisco. The murals are typically painted right on the museum wall. The artist works on site, and then they paint over the wall. And we explained that William doesn't live in San Francisco. He lives in Oakland. He doesn't have transportation access. He can't meet the schedule that the museum assigns for the artist, and that was not going to really be successful for him. So we discussed that we build panels at Creative Growth, and William would work on the mural, on the panels in his own space, and that we would move forward that way. So they were agreeable to that. That's what happened, and the panels were then delivered and installed to the museum. And it created this interesting situation where then there was an object that didn't get painted over. So I was like, oh, I wonder who owns that. So of course, William did. So they ended up having to buy it from him. So other considerations we asked for from the museum included access maps, a quiet room, staff training about disability, culture, and language. So when visitors ask questions, they could answer. A welcome area with materials in a variety of forms so people could access and understand what they were seeing. Large type text on the wall, a lower hang of the work for people in wheelchairs, and seating areas for visitors. We asked for exhibition previews for artists and family to take place during the daytime hours when schedules and transit options were easier. And we asked for artist participation at press conferences. We asked for an area where artists could take a break and have food in private during events. And we spoke to the museum about biographies and artist statements. This comes up all the time. Our process was to have the artists and staff work together to prepare and present artist biographies and statements from the artists themselves, and that they might be in a form that the museum was not used to receiving. And sometimes they were, I like pizza and art. And, if you've read a lot of artist statements on the walls, probably that's one of the better ones that you've ever come across, right? Sort of says it all. So what did the museum not do? Mostly for some budgetary reasons, they did not do audio tours. We wanted audio tours. They did not always have sign language interpretation or other kinds of accommodations, but they wanted to learn. So how can we use what we've learned from these lessons? Speaking from the point of a studio, I believe that this is really, as we've been hearing today, this is really a watershed moment in our field. And art studios, I feel, need to also meet this important moment as prepared professionals. So what does that mean? Institutions need to hear from us about our access and accommodation needs. I'm learning every day about what those are. You can't expect them to know. So do you have a checklist, access support list? Also, do you have consignments? Do you have contracts? Do you know who owns the copyright of the artist's work? It's surprising how many people don't, right? So we need to be professional so we can advance our artists' work as professionals. Encouraging questions and discussion about all of these topics will help. The issues are always changing, and they need to be designed and addressed to the circumstance. I mean, it used to be, the field has changed. It used to be being invited to the cafe at the corner to put art on the wall was a big event. Now we're dealing with major institutions. Are we prepared to meet those challenges, right? This is William working on his mural. When it got installed in the museum, he came in and did some last minute touch up. This is installation of the Dan Miller piece at SF MoMA. The early piece of Judith Scott and Dan Miller. Large painting by Joseph Aliff in the museum. So they ended up purchasing 110 objects for the permanent collection. Here is the gallery with Camille Holvert's work. Once the museum is opened during a docent tour. A tour of William's mural. And this also led to, other key moments in the field. The Turner Prize, of course, Marlon Mullen, who's from a related studio to creative growth in the San Francisco Bay Area, had a one-man show at MoMA in New York. This was about a year ago now, significant advancement in the field. For him, it's rare that you see a one-person show. Marlon's practice is reinterpreting the cover of art magazines, so you can see how he changes the covers on the back. And this is my photo of Nnena she attended William Scott's opening at Studio Voltaire for a few years ago, and this is her at the opening reception. And so 50 years ago, the artists that founded these spaces, I don't think would imagine the conversation we're having today. So that is a privilege. But, so what is the future? We live in a time now where there are artists with disabilities who, for the first time, have had lifelong artistic careers as professionals. This never happened before, right? Some of them have been very successful. So we've created a living history. And now it's our opportunity to continue to build upon that history. This is an amazing image for me. This is, on the left, a creative growth artist named Eli, a Down syndrome man who grew up around creative growth because his mother was a trustee. And on the right is Judith Scott's twin sister, Joyce. So when Eli became an artist at Creative Growth, he had the opportunity to do a one-man show in our gallery because we turned the gallery over to the artists to direct their own exhibitions sometimes. So he wanted to put Judith Scott sculptures on the wall so he could pay tribute to her as a Down syndrome artist who influenced him as a Down syndrome artist. So for me, it's really incredible moment, like the moon landing, where something has changed in the world, this kind of touching of the hands, where we have an artist with Down syndrome influencing the next generation without us in between. So I think that's really a moment. And I think that this is the future. Artists will create their own history now, becoming role models and mentors to the next generation. And I can't wait to see what that future looks like. Thank you.